sunset view. This is T Street. Down there, where the guy's working with his equipment down there. See that underneath that little umbrella? That's about where I first met Clint Eastwood when he was starring in Rawhide.
Oh, yeah?
He used to come down on the beach with some friends, some young ladies, and we used to stay right in here. I don't even remember those palm trees being there, and it was a totally different small little overpass there. Not that thing with, they used to let you jump off in front of the train if you wanted. They didn't, so they didn't have that thing with the big screen on top of it, so you can't jump off. And actually, they didn't even have that fence by the train. We used to go put pennies there for, flatten them out and make a memorial. Anyway, there's the famous San Clemente Pier. I used to run every day from the pier down to Cotton's Point down there, which is later became Castle Romanica, or the Western White House, when Richard Nixon was president. Anyway, that's about 2.5 miles from the pier down there. I used to run down there and back, and then sprint another mile up to the train station on the north side of San Clemente. I don't even think you could do that anymore, because when I was on the pier last night, it looks like it's all washed out right up to the rocks out there. So I don't even think there's sand you can run on up to the train station. Also, when I was young, they didn't have the snack shop thing here. None of that was there. They built one of these right next to the pier later on. But when I was young, we had the snack shop right at the start of the pier, where the Fisherman's Oyster Bar is today. It's called Stan's Snack Shack. And in 1956, I worked there, and I was it. Stan would burn some burgers and put them in, patties, and put them in the pan and take off to go to the Elks to play poker all day. And I was in charge. I made the hamburgers, the milkshakes, sundaes, and everything else. Sold all the drinks. We used to have these big bottles of drinks that, was popped in bottles, and kids would collect them. When I was younger, I used to collect them. You get 2 cents each for a bottle of pop. That could keep you fed, if you worked hard enough.
So how old were you when you moved here?
Well, we first moved here in 1954, so I was 12. And we were here for the summer. And then we went to Vista in the fall. And so I went to 7th grade in Vista. And then we came back the next summer and bought the place at 226 De La Rosa, a little 2-bedroom house. And that's where I lived through high school. And then after I graduated, I went to college for a year and then dropped out and lived on Miramar, 132 Miramar, with my brother John for a little while. And then, I went to Las Vegas on a date, and they had these drive-through marriage places, and I got married. And that's the end of the story.
That's the White Chapel or something?
The little White Chapel, yeah. Actually, it wasn't a drive-through then, actually. I was fibbing about that. You actually had to get out and walk. And then they didn't have one of Elvis's Cadillacs like they do now, and a big sign with him. But I did have a big movie poster cut out of Elvis from a movie he made. They had it down at the theater that we had, local theater, and it went home with me one night. Along with a couple, I collected those stop signs. I used to like those, just like that.
Okay.
Looking across there, see that big wall, retaining wall there?
Yep.
I built that with my boss, Ed Ross. That's concrete block, just like, my your grandfather's house there, that retaining wall I built.
What
Yep.
was his name that you?
Ed Ross.
Ed Ross.
He was a tile setter, and we did masonry work once in a while. We built that wall. Imagine it without any dirt behind it, so there was scaffolding, and it was just all block. It was later stucco. But the big thing about that, it was supposed to cure for 2 weeks before they backfilled it, and the guy that did the backfilling came in the next day and actually pushed out the wall a little bit, and they kind of smoothed that out when they did the stucco work, because you could actually see the curve you used to. The other thing about that house, I don't know if it's still there, but I put 2,000 square feet, I laid 2,000 square feet of Italian floor tile on that. That was a major contributor to my having bad knees. And of course, we did all the rest of the tile. Back in the kitchen, I remember they had a special design with gold inlay in it, real gold, in the kitchen tile. It was kind of a green tile with gold inlay in it. It was really beautiful. That was, at the time, the most expensive house that's being built in San Clemente.
What year was this? Do you remember? No.
Well, that would have been like 64. 1964. Yeah, not 18. 1960. So the other things to see here, this is kind of ugly. I don't like seeing that. But out there, we call that Seal Rock. Can you see that over there?
Yes.
Which is a lie, because we don't have seals here. We have sea lions. But everybody got confused about that. It's just like up at San Juan Capistrano, they used to think the pigeons were swallows. So they used to think those animals were seals, but they're sea lions. And the big difference you can see is they have big fins, legs that they can walk on, and they have ear flaps. Seals don't. They just have holes for ears. But, also a lot more dangerous. They can bite right through an arm this size with no problem.
A sea lion can?
Huh?
A sea lion can? Yeah.
The other thing, the dirty little buggers, in the winter, we used to do booby traps for white sea bass. And what that was, you'd have buoys, it was, a bunch of buoys put together, so you had a booby trap about that big. And then you wrap line around it, and you'd have a hook on it that you'd put squid. Some people call that calamari, but it was fish bait back in my day. You put a piece of squid on it. So then you'd come back in the next morning and pull that up, and you'd be lucky to get the head out of a 40-pound white sea bass, because the sea lions would take the rest of them while you were pulling that up. But anyway.
That's no fair.
Fortunately, we caught more than they could eat. That was actually probably our best moneymaker. The other thing we used to do is in the summer, we'd lay out lobster traps in the morning. And then and in the evening, we'd put shark set lines. Every 2.5 feet, we'd have a hook that we handmade out of 1/4-inch rebar, and file off the end, so it made a great big hook like that. And for that bait, we used to go to the Capistrano Beach Pier and dig in and pick out maggoty chunks of mackerel. Worst smell you could ever think of. Put that on there, and so that was shark bait. So we'd pull up sharks, so they're mostly leopard shark. That was very popular at that time. In the markets, they called it California whitefish. They were afraid to call it shark. And every once in a while, we'd catch something like a hammerhead. And one of those knocked your Uncle Larry out of the boat one time, and I shot the sucker with a shotgun. We had a 12-gauge pump shotgun. It was actually your grandfather's. We borrowed it. I shot the damn thing, and he came up screaming at me, don't shoot that gun off, you'll sink us. I didn't think about that. The shark was as long as the boat, you know. It was pretty big. It was actually it wasn't that long. It was an 18-foot skiff, and every once in a while, a whale would come up and scratch its back along the edge of that thing. You know, I'd look at a blue whale, and I'd go to the bow from the boat and look down there, and I'd see the big head out there. I'd go to the stern and look back there. I could see the tail, and the thing was going back and forth. You know, it'd have barnacles on its back, and it was scratching the barnacles off on the boat. That was always fun. That wasn't scary for some reason. I had a problem with sharks, but not with whales. Your great uncle Keith always used to tell us, don't go out farther than you have rope to let yourself down if you need to walk back to shore. So we usually have at least 30 feet of rope.
Okay, say that again.
So back on the other side of the underpass there, the wall was like straight across instead of coming down. Well, behind it, there were cabinets where the surfers stored their surfboards, and they were all Redwood, going from 6 feet to 8 feet or longer, up to 200 pounds, and you had to be at least 6 feet, 200 pounds to carry one of those things. Anyway, and up here, this part of the oyster bar used to be a boat house. They used to store boats that they take out. On the other side of it was Stan's Snack Shack. And I have a drawing made by John Severson at the house. He was our art instructor at Capistrano Union High School, and then later he had Surfer Magazine, which is his big claim to fame. But starting early in the summer of 1956, I worked at Stan's Snack Shack. I was really him. Stan would come in the morning, make fry up some burgers, put in the pan, and then go to the local Elks and play poker all day. And so I was left to the restaurant. I'd make the, you know, it's one of those big old places like we have out there, like this one. They actually moved down shack right here later on, and now I see that's also fishermen's. But you know, I did hamburgers and sundaes, milkshakes, that stuff. So the kids bottled pop, and they'd bring back the bottles and collect 2 cents deposit on it. But, that was the summer I also started being a towel setter, self-worker, did other jobs. As the first year I started paying into Social Security, first in 56 years doing that. About here, where Bruce Brown first started filming his surf movies, I can't remember for sure if that was 54 or 56. You know, $50, the summer of 55. He broke his leg surfing, and he had crutches, so I'd help him. He had a great big camera and a tripod, and I'd help him bring stuff up here. We'd get chairs from the Presbyterian Church, and I'd set them up in our garage, and when I closed the garage door, a big sheet up there, there'd be a screen, and we'd charge 50 cents a person, and they'd come see his movies. They were pretty good. In 1971, he did around, and then, like I said, John Severson was our art teacher, and then Surfer Magazine, a lot of surfers became famous and both of them in the magazine. This thing was new, highlighting some of the more recent surfers. To have surfing contests down here, and usually some Hollywood star would come down and be the narrator. They'd have a stand over here, and the surfing contest was usually on this side of the pier. Surf moderators came probably the most time was Andy Devine with his kind of high-pitched voice, I don't remember him for the movie, but he was probably our favorite surfing contest moderator. He used to be a bait place.
That's interesting.
The pier may have gone up further than it was pushed down. Right behind you, there was a restaurant, a fair-sized restaurant. It had tables and a counter. In later years, it was run by Bud Gable, who was my masonry boss for quite a while. He retired from masonry and ran that, and that was his kind of retirement job. Then on this side, we had a big winch. Roll a boat out here, and you pick it up and drop it down. Or our boat, our 18-foot skiff, was stored underneath. They had a platform, which is all gone, but underneath, like halfway between the water and the top, there was a platform there, and boats were stored there, skiffs, and some of them were used for fishing like ours, but they also had smaller little skiffs that would be used to go out to the boats that were buoyed there. Before they had Dana Harbor, all the fishing boats like the Some Fun, the San Clemente, and all those boats were moored out here. So whoever was driving the boat would take a little skiff and go out to it and pick up the boat, and then they'd bring it in here, and there was a ramp, stairs that went down, and people would come out and go down the stairs and get down to the boat and go fishing. And we'd see some pretty big sharks and whales. Pretty good sized whales would come right up here. Used to see a long time. That guy is moving really fast. If that's the same guy, he's way over there.
Yeah, the current carried him.
That's the trick when you're walking the piers. You always have to go to the end, touch the end rail. It used to be a quarter-mile pier. I don't know what it is now. We can't feed you. Nice try. you can kind of imagine Dana Point as it originally was before they had the harbor. Except all those, there wasn't anything on it. None of those houses, apartments, whatever they were. And so the story for that, people doing history, was written 2 years before the mass by Henry Dana. And he talks about it. They used to bring hides for the mission in San Juan and toss them off at the end of the cliff there to boats that were collected and take them back to Spain or wherever as a main leather supply. But it's also a nice little harbor that could take skiffs off the boats and bring supplies in. Out there, as the sign says, you can't see them. Oh yeah, you can. There's the Catalina Island over there. Sort of see it. Straight out in San Clemente Island. San Clemente Island, which is bombing practice by Brother the Marines. And of course, Catalina's kind of casino, and people still go out to that. It's a resort town. So, Catalina Island received its name in November 1602. It's the southernmost of the 8 California Channel Islands. Lived here, went to high school in the 1950s. Every day in the afternoon, a smog bank would roll down from LA. We used to have smog deaths in the early 50s. The whole story about that is the GM, I think it was, bought all the trolleys in LA and ripped out the trolley lines so they could, promote having more cars. And that led to really intense smog, a lot of smog deaths. But even late 50s, early 60s, it was really bad. You could hardly breathe in the afternoon. When I practiced football practice, I'd have a hard time breathing up in the school at Capistrano Beach, San Juan Capistrano Union High School. But you could just see the smog rolling in. It's a lot better